oxides of nitrogen section starts at 6.2.2 on page 75. Is that right?
That's right.
And it goes through by way of, in the first instance, the table setting out primary measures, and then a further table with secondary measures. Is that right?
That's right.
And then in the succeeding pages explains what information is being considered with regard to the plant being used, the abatement processes, with the conclusion that what's being offered is VAT and is the best available technique. Is that right?
That's right.
And the final conclusion, then, the one you quoted. Yes?
Yes.
And as to the other document you referred to in paragraph 2.7a of your rebuttal proof, that was core document 23.
So yes, essentially the whole of section 2.
So starting at page 4. And as I indicated previously, you set out 2.1 the questions that were being raised, and then set out the information which had been gathered and which was then offered in the way that we can see by reference to particular boiler suppliers. Is that right?
That's right.
That going over a number of pages with a conclusion then on page 7 of paragraph 2.6.
Yes.
And once again, I ask, when that information was provided after CD 23, was there any further question raised by the licensing and pollution control regime or Dr. Mark Rooney on behalf of the Council?
No, that was accepted and is commented on in a paragraph in the officer's report.
Can I just ask a question of clarification again on 2.7 of your summary proof? You talk about as an exception, the concentration of nitrogen oxides is set at 125 micrograms per meter cubed at 11% oxygen in dry flue gas. I think elsewhere you say that the actual operating conditions is more likely to be 6% oxygen.
Yes, possibly slightly lower.
Yeah.
Yes.
So can you just explain what that means in simple terms for me in terms of concentrations of NO2?
Yes. The concept of reference oxygen is that when you're running a combustion plant, essentially what you need to do is put in enough air to ensure you've got enough oxygen to ensure everything combusts. And if you put in more air, you'll have more spare oxygen, which will then be released to atmosphere. That will promote combustion, but it means you've got more air going through the system. It also means that if you were to not have a reference oxygen level, you could simply pump lots of air in, dilute your concentration, and appear to have a lower concentration released to atmosphere, which is not correct, which is why the European regulations in this area, and it's not just for waste incinerators, it's also for combustion plants, specify the emission limit at a specific level of oxygen. And when you are confirming compliance with that, you measure the level of oxygen net level of nitrogen dioxide you actually have, and then you adjust it to the reference level of oxygen. What that means in this case, actually, is that, as you said, the oxygen level in the actual combustion plant will probably be around 4 to 6%. That is a balance. It means you've got enough oxygen to make sure you've got enough combustion. It means you haven't got so much air going into the system that the plant operates inefficiently. Effectively, you would heat up lots of air and then cool it down again and release some unnecessary heat. You will then measure the nitrogen dioxide level and you will adjust it effectively downwards to get to your reference level of 11%. In modelling, and this is why this is fairly critical. In the modelling, what you're actually modelling is a release of grams of nitrogen dioxide per second. You're actually modelling massive stuff. And the mass of nitrogen dioxide you've got doesn't change in any way in this calculation. It's merely a calculation to enable you to compare with a specific number. There is some of this written down in my main proof of evidence, because the oxygen level point came up in the statement of case.
Yeah, I think 228. 228 or 4215.
4215. So 4215 through to 4221 explains what I just said, possibly more elegantly.
Okay, thank you for that explanation. Sorry, please.
Not at all. We're back then to the summary proof, and paragraph 2.8, if you could read through that, please, and stop at the end of 2.8.
Okay, so we're carrying on with the 6 stages of air quality assessment. So fifthly, I compared the predicted ground level concentrations resulting from emissions from the breath with the relevant air quality objectives and environmental assessment levels, and the significance of the concentration was evaluated. For a number of pollutants, the impact of emissions from the development could be screened out as insignificant and hence described as imperceptible. For most other pollutants, the impact could be described as negligible once background concentrations had been considered. For nitrogen dioxide, once I had taken account of the conversion of nitrogen oxide to nitrogen dioxide in the atmosphere and the likely operating hours, the impact could be described as imperceptible at residential receptors.
What's the point about the likely operating hours, please?
Oh, yes. As an initial worst-case modelling assumption, I had assumed that the plant will run 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, so 8,760 hours. But in reality, that isn't the case. The plant will be offline for maintenance. It will be offline for various other reasons. Essentially, for probably around 10% of the year. So when we were considering effectively a site-specific, case-specific assessment, for nitrogen dioxide only, we reduced the operating hours to 90% and applied that as a factor.
And the modelling assumptions are based on that?
The model assumption, so the modelling numbers reported for nitrogen dioxide in the environmental statement are based on that assumption. That isn't the case for every number that is reported, so I'll try and be clear when I come to that numbers later.
Okay.
But I should emphasise that is only the case for nitrogen dioxide.
Thank you. Can you go then and read off the remainder of section 2 of the summary proof?
Sixthly, I carried out a human health risk assessment for dioxins, furans and heavy metals, taking account of exposure pathways via food. I concluded that it is unlikely that exposure to emissions from the facility will lead to an adverse impact on health. I also considered the combined impact of the development of the Nexen coal bed methane plant, the Davyhulme wastewater treatment works biogas plant, and the proposed gas-fired power stations in Carrington. I concluded that the combined emissions would not lead to breaches of the air quality objective. The combined impact of the development of the Salford Red Stadium and Port Salford was also considered in the ES. These developments would lead to increased traffic impact on some roads to the north of the ship canal. As explained in paragraph 12.196 and 12.197 of the ES, the BREP has an insignificant impact in those areas which are most affected by the Salford Red and Port Salford development. I concluded, and still conclude, that the impact of the BREP on local air quality would be negligible. This conclusion was supported by all of the professional advisors and regulatory bodies who reviewed the air quality assessment. This includes Trafford Council's Environmental Health Department and its professional advisor, Salford City Council's professional advisors, and the Environment Agency's Specialist Air Quality Modelling and Assessment Unit.
Thank you. Then we go to section 3 of the summary, updates the air quality assessment?
The planning application was submitted on the 2nd of December 2010. I have therefore considered whether the air quality assessment should be updated to reflect any changes since then, and I have concluded that the ambience air quality section should be updated to take account of more recent data. I have obtained more recent data from national databases and from the Environmental Health Department of Traffic Council and Salford Council, focusing on nitrogen dioxide measurements. I have considered background continuous analyzers within 10 kilometres of the site and diffusion tube sites within 6 kilometres of the site. This includes the new continuous monitor and diffusion tube installed on Stromer Gardens on behalf of Traffic Council. I have concluded that if I were carrying out the assessment now, I would use a slightly increased background concentration of nitrogen dioxide for most receptors, and I would continue to use the same elevated background concentration for receptors which are very close to the M60. This would not change the conclusion of the assessment.
We need to deal with one or two matters which have arisen there, Mr. Oaken. First of all, with regard to the Liverpool Road diffusion tube.
Yes.
And SO7, yes?
Yes.
This replaces an earlier drawing which indicated that the diffusion tube was on a lamppost at the side of Liverpool Road.
It did, yes.
Was there in the past a diffusion tube on the lamppost on the side of Liverpool Road?
There are certainly diffusion tube fixings on that lamppost, but now there is no diffusion tube. Having looked at it, I suspect that a diffusion tube had been installed there, possibly with somebody who wasn't the local authority. But I accept Dr. Holman's statement that that is not where the local authority one is.
Have you established now where the local authority one is?
Yes. Again, Dr. Holman helpfully suggested where it might be. The document SO7 shows the location of the tube, which is effectively on the back garden gate stroke grill of the house at the end of Liverpool Road. What I've shown in the photos is specifically the small photo shows exactly where the tube is.
Okay.
Then we then pull out to show the location of that tube on the gate, and then on the big map you can see precisely where it is. So it is essentially on the corner of that building.
So it's on the private side, is it? I did have a look around there myself, but I couldn't spot it. But
No, it took quite a lot of hunting.
Right,
I'd say.
Okay, but we'll visit that part of the site.
Yes,
point actually
indeed.
where it is, and that's helpful.
Yes, I think the zoom has to be used to get that photo. So that is where it specifically is.
Can I just ask you then, now we're clear about where it is, about the document which is your second appendix to your SO6, please.
Yes. The final page, I think.
The document as a whole was extracts from Local Air Quality Management Technical Guidance, TG09, is that right?
That's right, yes.
The part that you provided for us is a part which includes siting and fixing of nitrogen dioxide diffusion tubes.
Yes.
And that starts at paragraph A1.114.
It does. There's actually two extracts. This is the second extract in that document.
Thank you.
Final page.
Looking at that, we're told the local siting criteria in box A1 above. We haven't got box. Oh yes, we have it on the previous page.
No, we haven't. So that's not particularly relevant.
Okay. The local siting criteria in box A1 above are applicable to diffusion tubes as well as automatic sites. Although it's important to place diffusion tubes where there is free circulation of air around the tube, the opposite extreme should also be avoided, i.e. areas of higher than usual turbulence. For this reason, the tube should not be located on the corner of a building. Care must be taken to avoid any very localized sources of sinks of nitrogen dioxide or disturbances to the airflow. For example, close proximity, less than 10 meters to the following, must be avoided. Heater flues, particularly low-level balanced flues, bushes or trees overhanging or surrounding the tube location, air conditioning outlets, extractor vents, or underground ventilation shafts. The site should be open to the sky with no overhanging vegetation or buildings. With that guidance in mind, what do you say about the diffusion tube which we've got at Liverpool Road?
Well, it appears that there are a number of trees overhanging that location. It means it's a fairly enclosed location for a diffusion tube, which counteracts the point about free circulation there around the tube, which actually is basically mentioned 3 times in that paragraph.
Yes. Well, we see that we're told that close proximity, less than 10 metres of the following must, and that's the language used, must be avoided. And the second point is that bushes or trees overhanging or surrounding the tube location. And we've noted in the text itself, not the bullet points, the tube should not be located on the corner of a building.
Yes.
Yes. But in the circumstances here, does this tube appear to be appropriately located?
It appears to have some disadvantages. I think it's also worth commenting with the more general point about this tube is that it is, in terms of its location, I think so you can see it. It's next door to a reasonably busy road, the A27, where there is queuing. It's actually very close now to that roundabout, so you've got accelerating traffic going past you, and it's maybe 50 metres from the M60. So in terms of what that tube is seeing, it's an awful lot of localised traffic sources, as well as being in a situation where, due to the overhanging trees, it is likely that the air will be kept in place to encourage high levels of nitrogen dioxide. So while I'm sure the tube is measuring correctly, it's not really something that could be said to be representative of a much wider area. It's fairly specifically representative of that corner.
Your point about close to a busy road, close to the junction of the M60 and the A57, if we go to core document 67B and page 41, which is the Environment Agency's decision document, section we've looked at before, but we can see on page 41, section 5.2.6.2, re-evaluation of nitrogen dioxide background data. There's a table, and then under the table 2 bullet points. The second bullet point says the closest monitor to Tyndall Street is the SA34 diffusion tube at Liverpool Road, with considerable exceedances of the EU EQS limit being measured between 2009 and 2011. This diffusion tube is located on a busy road close to the junction of the M60 and A57. We would expect levels of nitrogen dioxide to decrease with the distance from the primary road traffic sources. Tyndall Street is considerably further away from these sources. So your point about proximity and proximity to busy roads, is that a point which the Environment Agency is taking up or not?
It would appear so, yes.
Yeah. Can we then, just with the same point in mind, go to your main proof of evidence, please? And pages 24 and 25.
Yes.
We've got a table at pages 24 and 25. What's it showing us?
This is showing the measured concentrations of nitrogen dioxide by diffusion tubes, and I've included all the diffusion tubes within 6 kilometres of the development site from 2005 until mainly 2011, with a few tubes 2012, which are traffic tubes.
Right, and that includes Liverpool Road.
It does. Liverpool Road appears on page 25, so the second half of the table. What the table is showing is the name of the tube, type, so where R is roadside, familiar. The distance of that tube specifically from the stack, actually, and then the concentrations in I can go into that's kilometres, yes, international units, sorry. That's the distance from site for the spec in kilometres.
And the type is given as either UB, UC, UB1, or R. What are those? These?
So they're explained in paragraph 3.2.4. So UB or B is an urban background site, so it's reasonable distance from major roads. UC is urban centre, which is in the city centre. I is intermediate, which is similar to UC, and R is roadside, which is 1 and 5 metres from a busy road.
Right. The table is there to be read. What do you say about the Liverpool Road readings in the context of the suite of readings that you've got from other diffusion tubes? Does it show consistency or not?
The Liverpool Road tube is very high. The only ones that read at a similar level, as in 60 or higher, are the 3 tubes called M60C, which are basically right next door to the M60 further north. And the only other tubes that read above 50 consistently, even, are the various tubes which have the word Edenfield in their name. Edenfield Drive, Edenfield Lab, 44 Edenfield, all of which are on page 25. They're all in essentially the same location, which is close to the M60, coming at the junction of 13. It's actually shown, sir, in the diagram in appendix 2 to my main proof. For jumping. Which shows locations of various monitoring stations. So,
Yeah, can you just point out Edenfield Road?
I can. So Edenfield Road, if you see the junction between the M62 and the M60 rather,
Yeah.
there is a red blob going up towards junction 13. Those are the Edenfield Road tubes.
Up
Towards Worsley, exactly, yes. So they're basically close to the southern east motorway.
Okay.
We might just note that a point which, from these diagrams in your appendix 2, point we took up with Mr. Watts, that the concentrations being shown here, the monitored 3-year and monitored 7-year average concentrations, notwithstanding the fact that some of the locations are within the AQMA, they're recording concentrations below the EQM.
That's correct. Two fairly important examples of that are, I'm looking at the 3-year average, just so we've got similar colours. There is an orange marker along the M602 going towards Manchester, which is 50 Trevor Road, and that is essentially a road which is right next door to the M602. And there is a yellow dot further south where it says Urnston, and that is a tube in the ground of Kingsway School. It's about 100 odd metres away, I think. That one is called M60 Parkway officially. So those ones again are close to the motor, they're not quite as the Trevor Road one is actually fairly close. The other one is slightly further away. It continues to show that unless you're really, really close to the M60, you're not seeing these high concentrations.
But what we've got is what you referred to as the anomaly with Liverpool Road, that it's further away from those locations, but showing higher levels.
It's further away, slightly further away, yes, exactly.
We noticed that one of the locations identified for monitoring was Stroma Gardens, is that right?
That's right, yes. So in table 3, on page 24, I'd included concentrations from a diffusion tube at Stroma Gardens, which was installed, I think, in December 2011, originally by the council, primarily in response to this application, I think.
That's just out of junction 11.
That's correct, yes.
Junction 10, sorry.
Junction 10, sorry, you're right.
Sorry, junction 10, I'm sorry, junction 11 is the road, junction 10, yeah.
Yes. As explained in the text, the concentrations of 2012 are not full year concentrations, obviously. Those are extrapolated from the data up to the end of August, the latest data we've had. In addition to that diffusion tube, and that diffusion tube is situated at the end of Stroma Gardens, near to the roundabout. Again, we'll go down the side. In addition to that diffusion tube, Traffic Council have commissioned Envirotech, who commissioned their quality consultant, to install a continuous monitor on Stroma Gardens.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I wonder whether we might just here invite you to go to Essay 6, which is the supplementary paper distributed yesterday, copies provided this morning. And go to section 4 on page 9.
Yes.
And I think probably the simplest thing to do here is to ask you to read, because this is new material for people in relation to Stroma Gardens, to read paragraph 4.1, please.
Okay. Traffic Council have commissioned Envirotechnology to carry out continuous monitoring of nitrogen oxides and particulate matter in the Stroma Gardens. The monitoring station is around 50 metres from the M60 and from the roundabout at junction 9 of the M60. The results of the monitoring are shown in the table below, although I'll only be commenting on the nitrogen dioxide results.
It's junction 10.
It is junction 10, I realise that, yeah.
And then you've got your table.
Table numbers. So there are obviously full reports which Traffic Council have shared with the various air quality parties. I'm sure will be shared through, but these are the numbers that come from there.
And these were provided to us, I think, last week. Is that right?
The August one was provided in September and is mentioned in my proof.
Yeah.
The October one was provided, I think, on Tuesday or Wednesday last week, which one you'd realise the September one had not been distributed. It was a logistic issue, so that was then distributed as well.
Right, so we got these last week. You can then see what they're showing by way of nitrogen dioxide, PM10, PM2.5, yes?
So it can be seen that the average nitrogen dioxide concentration over the 3-month period was 28.2 micrograms per cubic metre. The monitoring reports also draw attention to the daily air quality index, which is established by Davyhulme. These assign an index of 1 to 10 to all hourly average concentrations of nitrogen dioxide and classify this into 4 bands: low, moderate, high, and very high. Over the 3-month monitoring period, the hourly concentrations remained in index 1 for most of the time, with occasional hours index 2, and all of the hours can be classified as low. DEFRA's technical guidance note LAQM TG09, which provides guidance to local authorities on various air quality matters, includes a methodology for estimating the annual average concentration from monitoring over a short period. This is contained in box 3.2, which I've attached as appendix 2, so that's the other extracts. The methodology is as follows, taken from box 3.2, but with specific references to the example calculations removed. So here's some of the italic bits are after that.
So you set out what's contained within the box there, yes?
So the first stage is to identify 2 to 4 nearby long-term continuous monitoring sites, ideally those forming part of the national network. These should be background sites to avoid any very local effects that may occur at roadside sites, and should, wherever possible, lie within a radius of about 50 miles. There are actually a total of 13 appropriate monitoring sites within 50 miles, of which 4, Manchester Piccadilly, Manchester South, Warrington and Wigan Central, are within 20 kilometres. So I've therefore considered these 4 monitoring stations, and they should give a good indication of the pattern of pollutant concentrations in the region. You then obtain the annual means for the calendar year for these sites, work out the period means for the period of interest from those sites again, calculate the ratio of the annual means to the period mean for each of the sites, and calculate the average of these ratios. So what we're trying to do there is establish how concentration of nitrogen dioxide vary through the year is a recognised thing, and apply that adjustment factor to our site. So this has been done in the table below using data from the National Air Quality Archive. I've used annual means from 2011 and a period mean from 2012, since an annual mean for 2012 is for obvious reasons not yet available. This approach is acceptable as explained in the note in Bond 3.2 and LAQM TG09. If the short-term period covers, for instance, February to June 2009, and the work is being carried out in August 2009, then an annual mean for 2009 will not be available. The calculation can then be carried out using the ratio to the 2008 annual mean, but the result is then an estimate of the 2008 annual mean for the short-term site. So the table that shows those numbers can be calculated an average ratio of 1.13. So in other words, the period mean is lower than the annual mean. I also carried out this calculation for all 13 sites within 50 miles. This goes basically to the other side of the pen, so to the sort of area, which gives an average ratio of 1.06. This means that restricting the analysis of the 4 closest monitoring sites will actually give a higher estimated concentration. So the final stage is to multiply the measured period mean concentration by this adjustment factor. So multiplying the measured period mean concentration of 28.2 micrograms per cubic metre by the average ratio of 1.13 gives an estimation of the annual mean of 31.9 micrograms per cubic metre, which is clearly below the air quality objective of 40. It is interesting to note that in the February 2011 supplementary submission, which is called document 15B, I suggested background concentration in Stromer Garden should be taken as 32 micrograms per cubic metre. This was the concentration measured at the continuous monitoring station near junction 9, definitely junction 9 this time, of the M60 in 2008. And this is the monitoring station referred to as Moss Park in table 2 in my group, where the measured concentrations vary between 29 micrograms and 34 micrograms per cubic metre over the period 2005 to 2011. I consider that this monitoring supports my view that the Liverpool Road diffusion tube is not representative of the wider area, and that the concentration measured at Salt Eccles is more representative.
Just looking back at your paragraph 4.9,
yes.
you referred there to core document 15B, which is the February 2011 submission to the authority. Is that right?
Yes, that's right.
And you drew attention to the fact that you suggested in core document 15B that a value of 32 micrograms per metre cubed was appropriate
I did, yes.
for Stromer Gardens. I just wanted to pick that up as to where that was on page 5 of core document 15B, please.
Yes. That is in response to the sixth question at this stage. From Traffic Council Solutions Licensing Team.
And what they were asking was the council requests submission of a revised version of tables 1218 and 1219, showing an estimated baseline level of process contribution of sensitive properties in the AQMA as a separate entry to allow this to be evaluated more clearly.
That's right, yes.
So what did you say by reference to Stromer Gardens and the value that was appropriate as a baseline for it?
So what I said was that in addition to the diffusion tube on 673 Liverpool Road, Salford, there's a diffusion tube at the M60 Junction Parkway, which recorded a bias-adjusted concentration of 32 micrograms per cubic metre. And so we consider that this is an appropriate background concentration for the receptor at Stromer Gardens.
That's taken from the second paragraph of your response.
It is. So in the table, I list a number of receptors. All of the receptors apart from Stromer Gardens are to the north of the ship canal. I think that's true. And so therefore, in this table, I've used the Liverpool Road concentration. My view was that Stromer Gardens being in a totally different location than wasn't actually appropriate, and the measurements at the location near junction 9, in a very similar location to Stromer Gardens is in relation to junction 10, would be more appropriate. So that's why I use 32.
On the basis of the latest audited, I think, agriculture consultants audited results for Stromer Gardens using the method represented in the guidance stage. What's your view with regard to Stromer Gardens? level borne out, or not?
Yes, it was.
Thank you. Then you can put SO6 to one side just for a moment, if you would. Still with the same point, however, we've got an issue about Eccles, the Eccles monitoring station, and whether it's representative for Tyndall Street.
Yes.
Can you help us about that, please?
Yes, and there are a number of reasons why I felt the Salford Eccles was appropriate for Tyndall Street in that general wider area. The first point, which I think actually everybody does agree on, is that Tyndall Street is further away from the M60 than Eccles is from the M602. Salford is about, the Eccles tube is 133 metres away, and the Tyndall Street is somewhere between 160 and 190, depending where you go to. The second point is related to, which in fact go back to SO6 again, I'm afraid, is related to the information provided by Dr. Watson relating to upwind and downwind concentrations. You recall that he provided a paper by Gilbert et al. As part of the rebuttal. Maybe help with SO6 again, if that's okay.
Yes, this is Mr. Watson's rebuttal proof AW4, produced the paper by Gilbert and others, yes?
Yes.
You respond to that, I think, in terms in which I put to it in cross-examination, that section 3 of SO6 on page 8 we need. And again, we'll adopt the same approach. You can just read on paragraph 3.1 to the end of section 3, please.
Okay. In Dr. Watson's rebuttal proof, he refers to a paper by Gilbert et al. And states that this shows that concentrations were significantly lower upwind than downwind of the road. He uses this quote to support his assertion that Salford Eccles is not an appropriate monitoring station because it is upwind of the M602. While he has quoted accurately from the abstract of the paper, I consider that he has misunderstood the term significantly, and that this is made clear by the paper as a whole. In section 3 of the paper, it is stated that concentrations of nitrogen dioxide decreased as distance from the highway decreased, and were systematically higher downwind than upwind. The paper then states that a model which took account of the upwind-downwind locations of monitoring stations was statistically very good, with an R2 coefficient of 0.97. In other words, the analysis reported in the paper shows that there was a statistically significant difference between concentration upwind and downwind of the road. This means that there was a difference, and the data supports this as being a true systematic difference, rather than being caused by random measurement errors or fluctuations. However, the actual data, which can be found in figure 1 in the paper, shows that the absolute difference between the upwind and downwind concentration is actually quite small. At the distance of interest for Salford Eccles and Tyndall Street, which is around 150 to 200 metres, the upwind concentrations are 16 to 22 parts per billion, which is equivalent to 30.6 to 42 micrograms per cubic metre. And the downwind concentrations are 17.5 to 23 parts per billion, 33.4 to 43.9 micrograms per cubic metre. These numbers have basically been taken from the graph, so it's...
Okay, 17.5 to 44.9.
17.5 to 23 parts per billion. All the numbers are written down here, which means it gives you an equivalent of 33.4 to 43.9. Hence, the absolute difference is 1 or 2 parts per billion, which is equivalent to, probably too precise, probably 2 to 4 micrograms per cubic metre. Figure 1 also shows the difference in concentration when moving from about 100 metres away to about 150 metres away is about 1 to 3 parts per billion, or probably slightly more than the difference between upwind and downwind. Finally, his claim that Tyndall Street is upwind of the M60 is dubious. He has shown a windrose in 2004, which shows the wind blowing from the west quite frequently. However, the windroses in figure 12.2 in ES, which is called document 5, show that this was not the case in 2000, 2002 or 2003, and it was less pronounced in 2001. Hence, while the wind does blow from the M60 towards Tyndall Street more frequently than it blows from the M602 towards Eccles, this is not the same situation as the downwind-upwind pattern from Gilbert et al., and so the difference would be less pronounced than found in Gilbert et al.
Can you just show us, please, from the environmental statement in figure 12.2, core document 5, what it is that you're referring to, please? The environmental statement, core document 5, chapter 12, and figure 12.2. Your comment was he had shown us 2004.
Yes, so he includes 2004 in his diagram, which shows a fairly extensive amount of wind coming from the westerly routes. But that is rather different from particularly 2000, 2002, 2003, which show rather fewer winds coming from the west and more coming from the south. And it's similar but less pronounced in 2001. But I think the main point is that it isn't that Tyndall Street is continuously down to the M60.
While we're on that, can you just deal with that? Dr. Watson also made that the M60, I think, might be in the M602 and like that.
That is true. There is more traffic on the M60, so it is. I would expect that if you had a continuous monitor at the same distance from the M60 as Salt Eccles is from the M602, then you probably get some high concentration. That is correct. I'll be able to say Tyndall Street is further away.
Okay.
So that's dealing with SO6 and Mr. Watson's rebuttal.
Can I just stop you, Mr. Kingston? There's a point. Have you got a...
Just to put in context, do we have any figures in hand, knowing how different the M60 and M602 is, just to put that in context for us?
I'm sure if you speak to Mr. Oaken after the outside inquiry, he'll be able to provide you.
There are no they're in a statement.
Or Dr. Watson. I won't go into it here, but I think it's in Dr. Watson's.
Okay, thank you.
The next matter is the comment about potential impact of traffic park emissions on Salford Eccles.
Yes.
Mr. Watson's proof of evidence, paragraph 28, please. It's all right, it's coming now. Which paragraph? 28.
Paragraph 28, that's the figure. You don't think to be exact.
Paragraph 28 of his proof, Mr. Watson says the Greater Manchester emissions inventory shows that the 1 by 1 kilometre grid square in which the fuel place is located had total nitrogen oxide emissions of 58.72 tonnes in 2007. The application would therefore increase the nitrogen oxide emissions from the grid square by circa 178%. What do you say about that?
It's not really that paragraph comment, it's more that Dr. Watson had raised the question of essentially where...
Dr. Oh, are you Dr.
I don't.
You are Dr. Watson, okay, sorry. Oh, he's not? No, Mr. Watson.
No, it's Mr. Watson. I've been insulting him for a while. Yes.
The point was being made was that Salford Eccles being down with the M602, upwind of the M602, there's no reason why it should be receiving higher levels. what the figure shows from Mr. Watson's group is the Sulfur-Eccles tube on continuous monitor is just about on this picture. If you see where it says the word display on the right hand side,
Yeah.
the square next to the partial square next to it is essentially where the continuous monitoring point is. And what you can see is that both the south and the north of that square, we have a very darkly coloured thing indicating larger levels of nitrogen dioxide emissions.
And these are emissions from the grid square.
From the grid square, so this covers process emissions and transport emissions. The square to the south has total emission of 272 tonnes, using the same number to equivalent to it's probably the highest number in that area. And my only comment here would be that it's likely that those emissions are linked to the process emissions around Bradford Park, and they are essentially to the south of Sulfur-Eccles continuous monitor. And Sulfur-Eccles continuous monitor is specifically known as background stroke industrial tube, so it's there really to pick up those sorts of emissions. So in terms of looking at, when I originally considered Sulfur-Eccles, my view was that Sulfur-Eccles was likely to overestimate the impact, really because it was receiving these other emissions. My feeling, if we take account of those emissions and then the relative distance and the relative traffic, is probably measuring something fairly close to very similar levels.
Still with the same point about background levels in demand, I don't think it got a document, but it was put in, a document number, but it was put in last week, which was the Environment Agency's response to the consultation. It's a letter dated 13th September 2012.
Yes, which again I don't think I have one, unfortunately. Yes, I got it.
Right, so let me see if someone else has got a copy of it. Yes, I don't think it's got a number. This is the letter from the agency to Traffic Council enclosing documents for your public register, yes?
Yes.
And it relates to the environmental permit application,
Yes.
yes? And what's included with it is the Air Quality Modelling and Assessment Unit response, yes?
Yes.
And what Mr. Watson was drawing attention to, and apparently placing some store on, was a part of the conclusions at page 2 of the ACMA document. 2.1, there are no grounds for assuming background annual mean nitrogen dioxide levels are below the relevant environmental standard.
Yes.
And suggesting that might be saying something different to what was being finally said in the final decision document on the permit. Yes?
Yes.
As to which is the agency's last word in terms of these matters, is that the decision document or this consultation?
It would be the decision document.
And as to what the decision document says, can you go please in core document 67B to page 41?
So this is section 5.2.6.2, which is the re-evaluation of nitrogen dioxide background data. So this is the section that's added into the decision document, the final decision document, as opposed to the draft decision document. In essence, in response to the Salford City Council submission, which was received today, I think, which was responded to by this applicant. I think. So it's all the same related bits.
And if we look at the bottom of page 41, there are two paragraphs being referred to before. The first, the penultimate one, starts with the wording, based on a review of the available background data, we believe it's no longer appropriate for us to base our consideration of nitrogen dioxide impact on an absolute background of 36.3 micrograms per meter cubed. If this figure is correct, 36.8, using 2010 and 2011 data, then the PC would still not cause this to exceed the EU EQS. Then the final paragraph on that page, however, given the variability of nitrogen dioxide levels at different locations, with air substances in it are dynamic, there is an uncertainty around which monitoring site is the most representative. The background annual nitrogen dioxide levels in Tyndall Street. We therefore looked at the wider area and considered the impact of the applicant's maximum predicted process contribution of 0.69 micrograms per meter cubed, making the assumption that as we cannot establish the precise value of background annual nitrogen dioxide, and as the data indicate elevated levels in the vicinity of Tyndall Street, there is the potential for the background to already exceed the EU EQS. Yes?
Yes.
I'm not sure whether this is entirely the point, but do you see in the agency saying there's the potential for the background to already exceed the EQS, and ACMAL saying there are no grounds for assuming the annual needs are below the relevant environmental standard? Is there a material difference here in your view?
I don't think there is a material difference because the consequence of the assessment is the same.
Well, let's take the consequences of the assessment as being the same. First of all, as far as the response being put on the public register is concerned, can you go to the front sheet of it, please? The front sheet of the actual ACMAL response, not the Environment Agency's letter. So just turn in to a sheet that's headed Air Quality Modelling and Assessment Unit, and it's got a box in the middle. The box in the middle, I think so, in the document you've got, it's the third page.
Yeah.
It's the third sheet of paper, and there should be a box in the middle of the page that looks like that, so if I may, that's what I'm referring to.
No, sorry, I think I'm in the wrong document. So,
yes, you handed it in last week. It's the one we've just been looking at, paragraph 2.1.
Sorry.
So the first page looks like that.
Well, could somebody provide me with a copy? I'm not absolutely sure. Thank you. Thank you very much. Sorry.
No, not at all, sir. So perhaps I could just go backwards a bit, please. The document you've just been provided with, if you go just over the page from the page which contains the box, and you can see summary of work request, yes?
Yeah.
And the second paragraph, conclusions.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's paragraph 2.1 that Mr. Watson was drawing attention to. There are no grounds for assuming background annual mean nitrogen dioxide levels below the relevant environmental standard. Yes?
Yeah.
And we've now just seen the final decision document, the agency's last word on the matter, telling us there is the potential for background to already exceed. Mr. Aitken is telling us that he doesn't think that there's any substantive difference between them, and you were just going on, Mr. Aitken, to say, I think that you were supported in that view because the outcome or the recommendation remained the same. And if the recommendation contained in the document the inspector has just been handed, in the page that contains the box, that box, yes?
It is, yes.
And what was the Air Quality Modelling and Assessment Unit's recommendation?
Its final conclusion was the applicant's air quality impact assessment can be used as a basis for permitting.
And then conditions or noted?
Which is related to the combined process contributions from Barton, REP and United Utilities will be unlikely to exceed 3% of the environmental standard for annual mean nitrogen dioxide per human receptor within the local air quality management area.
And then how that was finally dealt with in the decision document, core document 67B, page 43, and the paragraph at the top of the page.
Yes.
They tell us, nor do we consider that the point of highest impact assessed against what we consider to be a reasonable and representative background level, there will be an exceedance of the EU EQS. However, even if there was an existing exceedance at this point, any impact on it would be negligible.
Yes.
Yes? Thank you. Then you could put that to one side and put the document that was put in last week to one side. And I think we were told also, Mr. Oakham, that the Salford Borough Council had made representations to the Environment Agency with regard to, among other things, nitrogen dioxide levels. Is that right?
Yes, we were. Yeah.
And did that change the Air Quality Modelling and Assessment Unit's recommendation or not?
It didn't, no.
Right. Right. Then you could go, please, back to your summary proof of evidence, to section 4. And if you could read section 4 of the summary, please.
Okay, section 4, response to main parties and consultees. Trafford Council have referred to the air quality impact in its statement of case, CD 31. Excuse me. Paragraph 4.2 states, drawing on the substantial number of representations received during the Council's handling of the planning application related to this appeal proposal, the LPA will demonstrate that there is a very significant and strongly held view that the appeal proposal would have a serious impact on air quality in the vicinity of the appeal site, which in turn would have a detrimental impact upon the health of local communities. The LPA will provide evidence to demonstrate that there is sufficient a body of respectable scientific evidence and opinion to support this view, and therefore that the perceptions amongst the local communities are capable of being substantiated. I note that the Trafford Council does not contend that the BREP will have a serious impact on air quality, but rather that there is a perception that it will. This perception is contradicted by my evidence and by the Council's own officers. I do not consider that Trafford Council's statement in the second half of the second sentence of paragraph 4.2 is correct, and Professor Jim Bridges has provided a statement of health impact in Appendix 2 to my main proof. Moving on, Breed Clean Air Group, VCAG, have consistently contended that the threat will have a significant adverse impact on local air quality and health. This theme runs through their statement of case, CD 52, in particular their issues B, C and D. I have commented on the points raised by VCAG in their statement of case, which I have assumed sets out the full particulars of the case to be presented and all of the relevant documents to be relied upon. I do not consider that any points raised by VCAG would change the conclusions of my assessment. In particular, I have demonstrated that the proposed stack height is sufficient. I have provided evidence that bag filters are very effective at removing particle matter of all sizes. And I do not consider that any of the papers alluded to in the VCAG statement of case demonstrate objective evidence of health effects from the BREP. I have also commented on the written submissions by Keith Pilgrim, Peter Kilbert, Kathleen Orts, and Lawrence Walsh in CD 53. Again, I do not consider that any points raised by these submissions would change the conclusions of my assessment.
Just go to your main proof of evidence, would you, and section 4. is your response to the main passes, is that correct?
That's right.
4.1 was traffic council, 4.2 was the clean air group, yes?
Yes.
And you've set out, therefore, as issues B, C and D, yes?
I have, yes.
And issue B in particular, the impact of development from local air quality is dealt with in the main proof 4.23 to 4.27, is that correct?
Well, it's 4 point, essentially goes all the way to 4.227.
Yes, 4.227, yes. Can I ask you please just to look at 4.212,
Yes.
which suggests in the quote from the group's statement that the applicant's data does not take account further planned development, which will only serve to increase the levels of pollutants. The suggestion being that you've failed, in effect, to take into account cumulative impacts. Is that correct? That's what they say.
Yes, but what they're saying is correct. What they're saying is not correct.
And have the cumulative impacts of all relevant developments been taken into account in the assessment?
They have, yes.
Including any referred to, and you list them in 4.212, I think, of your proof, is that right?
I do. So I list 5 in 4.212. Davyhulme wastewater treatment plants, the coal-bed methane plants, and if you want to use the Carrington power stations, are all specifically included in the cumulative assessment. And I referred to those earlier. C and D are 2 other developments which are not specifically included in the cumulative assessment, so I've commented on those here. The first one is described in the statement case as an other biomass plant in the Trafford Park area. This appears to relate to a proposal by Demolition Direct to build a small plant. When the original planning application was granted, there wasn't actually an air quality assessment associated with it. So therefore, we would suggest the planning authority was happy to give permission without assessing the impact on air quality, assuming there wasn't a major concern. They've now submitted an extension to the existing planning permission, I presume because they didn't implement it within the relevant period. And that did include an air quality assessment, which is how it's come to everyone's attention now. As I explained, that predicts a maximum annual average concentration of 8 micrograms per cubic metre from this biomass plant, which is, if you remember, I was saying about 0.7 from here. The reason it's so much greater is because the tank out there is actually only 20 metres. The concentration of 8 occurs really very close. Once we're about 500 metres away, we're down to 0.2 micrograms per cubic metre, and since this plant is 3 kilometres away from the REP, it's clear that there will not be a cumulative impact between these 2 plants. The final one is the reference to the paper mill, which I assume is the safe paper mill in Carrington. That is further away from the REP and than the Carrington power stations, and releases rather less nitrogen dioxide. So I've looked at the air quality assessment for that and showed that even before you get to Flixton, we're down to insignificant. So again, there is not a cumulative impact issue here.
Absolutely. The prevailing point.
Then at page 33 of your main proof, you deal paragraph 4.228 and following with issue C. Is that right?
That is correct, yes.
And if we just look at 4.231, where you refer to the positions of the Health Protection Agency, the Environment Agency, and Traffic Council's Environmental Health Department, and record the fact that they don't raise any objection to the proposal.
Not on the grounds of actual health impacts, no.
We need, I think, to deal with anything further from that section. And 4.250 to 4.265.
Yes.
Dealing here
We are, yes.
And the view that you expressed with regard to the efficiency of collection systems, is it consistent or inconsistent with the view expressed by the Environment Agency in the decision document, or document 67B?
It is consistent with the Environment Agency.
Thank you. Then, as far as your summary proof is concerned, we've finished with that. You can put it to one side.
It might be a good time to take a break.
Yes, certainly. Very clear.
Thank you. 11:04. We'll break until 11:20.
Thank you.